Hello and welcome to Should I Wish Someone Told Me, a weekly series of educational conversations where my guests and I talk about all of the shit that we wish someone told us at one point or another so that you don't have to figure it out the hard way. I'm your host, John Renee, and I am an evidence-based life coach that specializes in teaching you the how-to when it comes to helping yourself so that you can be confident in who that is and start living that hashtag best life that you see everyone posting about on the social medias. Joining us today, we have a special guest. Sebastian Rusk is in the house. He is known on the Instagram as Podcast Launch Guy. And what we are going to be talking about in this episode today is the choice to evolve, specifically focusing on how adversity doesn't always equal resilience. It's something where you have a choice in how you respond to that. And so we're doing this with the goal of helping you gain an awareness of where you might have some unidentified opportunities to choose. And so as we listen today, we invite you to just think about that. Think about where you might have some, choices that you can make and like ways that you can evolve that you might not have considered until Sebastian and I were like, hey, think about that. So with that, let me go ahead and introduce you to our guest today. Sebastian Rusk is a podcast launch specialist. He's been building online communities for the last 15 years and has made it his mission to help people tell their stories by starting a podcast. Sebastian founded the podcastlaunch.lab.com in 2016 as a turnkey podcast launch solution for marketers and entrepreneurs that want to start a podcast. He knows that everyone has an incredible story inside of them and that all they need is someone to ask them the questions so that they can share it with the world. He is also currently the host of gritdaily.com startup podcast that covers the world of tech and startups. Web3 Sucks, a show dedicated to education about the world of Web3, NFTs, and the metaverse, and Beyond the Story podcast, a show that interviews entrepreneurs and business owners. And we are so glad that you are here today. Is there anything else you want to add before we dive in?
Oh my gosh, take a breath.
Right.
That was a lot. Jonathan, it's so great to see you again. Thanks for having me on. And it's great to be your special guest.
Yeah.
Is everyone special though?
No, because not everyone. So Sebastian's particular special because you knew me before I became me.
I knew the old John.
You knew I had short hair.
The bob cut.
A bob cut. Yeah, now this shit is like down to my waist. Like
wow.
You can't even.
I have serious hair envy.
You can't even see it. Like I can't even on my tiptoes, and you can't even see it all. So this is very special because we go way back.
Yeah, we do. Full circle, baby. Full circle.
Full circle, which is so crazy. So so you are very special. So I'm glad that you're here.
I appreciate that. I have another one. You interned for us for a little while. I think that's how we first met. But I have another dear friend of mine that interned doing some film work not film work, but like when I would cover the events and I would go to events and they would need like a guy girl combo. She was the only one to ever be on camera with me. MJ Acosta is now on the NFL Network and does a major show on Sunday mornings and NFL week updates. And she's really the female face of the NFL Network. So we're a springboard for humans doing great things, apparently, but we only figured that out, decades later.
Decades later. So that's cool. Okay, well, congratulations on that. And like recognizing it eventually, better late than never, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, okay, well, let's go ahead and dive in. We're talking about evolution. And so the question of the hour, what is some shit that you or someone would have told you about evolution?
Like evolving as a human?
Yeah.
It's getting, first of all, no one's going to tell you that you need to do the work. No one's going to tell you that you need to heal. Mm-hmm. You're going to be brought through scenarios, lessons, and experiences that reveal that to you. Mm-hmm. But there's I wish that would have been a lot more clear. And I wish that, I wish I would have known that everyone, our parents included, whatever it is, was doing the best that they could do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
With the resources that they had.
Yeah.
My dad beat me. My dad left me. Whatever happened, I know that sucks. Got it. But these individuals were still doing the absolute best that they possibly could do with the resources they had. That took me a long time. That took me about 40 years to understand about my dad.
Yeah.
It really, really did. And that, I guess being reminded that people are just gonna be people most of the time. I posted last week. I saw a meme. It was genius. It said, "Stop being shocked at people being themselves."
Yeah.
And I wish I would have known that, a long time ago.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes a lot of sense. Dr. Brene Brown always says, like we just have to assume that people are always doing their best. And yeah, I think that it's a hard pill to swallow,
Sure, it
especially
is.
growing up, because, as little babies that depend on people, it's something where you have to assume that this caregiver knows what's best and that they are, the one in charge. And so if anything, falls outside of that, if there's anything, where someone is at fault, when we often internalize that because we're like, well, it can't be them. Like I literally have to depend on them for my survival. And so whenever we grow up years later and realize, oh, yeah, we're all just people, it sucks.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
really sucks.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah. How has learning that changed things for you?
I mean, I try to pass it on to my daughter and, try to help her better understand, that well, first and foremost, as a father, there was nothing more liberating than the day that I could just tell her, hey, I'm just making all this shit up
How old was she?
and I'm just doing the best I could possibly do. And I don't know that it was in so many words, but
Okay.
I did things like apologize and have conversations. And yeah, I apologized a lot, which I think is so important as a parent.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
important because it shows that you're human
Right.
at the same time. And it also provides opportunity for you, it creates margin in the relationship for them to go, well, hold on a second. He's a human being. So I think that, that part of it.
Was that so? This was something that you did all along, like in raising her, or
Yeah. I
okay,
mean, for the most part. And the more I continued to heal, the more aware I became.
right?
These days she'll thank me for checking in with myself,
Hmm.
So it's like, hey, thanks for checking in and owning that.
I think that's a really aware way to parent and caregive because, like you said, like not only is it showing her like, hey, I'm human, but also it's giving her the permission to be human as
Sure.
well. Because
Sure.
I think oftentimes we develop this need, I'm using quotations, but need, quote unquote, to be perfect. And we develop, things of like people pleasing and perfectionism because we never see, or at least I know, my mom did apologize for some things, but it wasn't often. And so I think that whenever we don't see that exemplified, when we don't see that behavior modeled, then it's often something where we get really stuck and fixated on like the idea of what we like should and shouldn't, again, quotations, be, and like how we should and shouldn't like show up in that way. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think that hinders our evolution in a lot of ways because we're kind of boxed in that sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something where it's like I can only operate within these parameters, and anything outside of that is a no or isn't allowed. It isn't like accepted. And so, yeah, it's something where whenever we do that, like the choice to evolve is what we're having a conversation about. And so it's kind of like you don't feel that you have a choice in that way. It's not freeing. It's not um, allowing.
Yeah. I mean, I look back and, granted, my generation, you know, did have somewhat of a voice, but it was on the back end of a
Mm,
generation that had no voice, and the generation prior to that that had absolutely no voice. You open your mouth, you get your teeth knocked out, and
yeah.
that's just the way that's just the way it worked out. But still, being raised in the '80s and still that same type of do as I say, not as I do is just total bullshit and just terrible parenting, in my opinion. And we're just taught so wrong. I mean, it was just so. I mean, from the upper, again, doing the best that they possibly could do with the resources they had. I got it. But I'll give you an example. So I grew up going to church, right? Grew up into a Southern Baptist church, and that was
Mm-hmm.
just what we did. We don't drink, we don't chew, we don't hang with those that do, and that's we go to church 3 times a week, and that's that, and it's brimstone and fire and hell and you're a sinner, right?
Right.
And 43 years later, not 43 years later, but I would say at least 23 years later, because I got in right around my 1920s, I started to go, wait a second, what's this whole Christianity thing look like? Walked away, started to explore a little bit, and then was brought back to it on my own. Knowing and understanding and belief system, and I quickly realized that the gospel within Christianity is just not that difficult. It's just not that difficult at all. And if you look at it, regardless of what you believe or what faith you have or do or do not have, regardless, Jesus did walk the earth and did live, and he was a great human being. And what he did while he was here was a pretty good way to model being a human being, right? Most people can't argue that. But the way I was raised, it wasn't that. I didn't see that in that specific light. And then the second part, religion was one. I was taught it was religion, first of all, which divides, not relationship, has nothing to do with faith. And the second part of that was not having a voice and constantly being silenced, and you're hyper and you have ADD and what's wrong with them, and poking and prodding and trying to figure out instead of just letting me be. I wasn't a bad kid. I just talked a lot and I had a tremendous amount of energy. None of that has changed. It's just been channeled a little bit. And now I do it for a living because it's my gift. But could you imagine? Like, I look back now and I was like, I almost, had that wick, that spark, silenced, blown out, etc. And thankfully I had, I'm stubborn, very, very stubborn, personality. That's just the way I am. Tell me that I can't, and I absolutely will. And even, along the unconventional ways of thinking, I still was like, no, there's a better way. I've always said that there's a better way. I mean, as an entrepreneur, we're always thinking that, but as a human being, I constantly think about that as well. Like, there's so much, but and again, the only thing that I had everything that I needed. Okay. My parents got divorced. It wasn't that bad of a childhood, but there was a lot of trauma created, emotional trauma created because of that. And I think any kid goes through that if their parents split up, and especially if the other parent gets remarried, which happened in my scenario. Then you got an overbearing step parent that's not even really, you got a lot going on with that. And then, my dad just threw his hands in the air one day and was like, I don't want to deal with this anymore. Let's just drop them off and see if they can fix them there. And so that abandonment and so mom left, got, that started to happen. And then, so I'm living in a place of traumatic abandonment, but I don't know what the fuck that is. I have no idea what that is at 9, 10, 11 years. I just have no clue. I just know that this is extremely uncomfortable and extremely difficult. Now looking back in retrospect, it's all part of my story. I mean, the most recent talk that I'm creating right now is how podcasting can help you find your voice. And we're going to dig in more into that story of, my past and what I experienced, but what I chose to do with it and what that meant to my healing journey, and then what it meant to my business and the people that I get the opportunity to go and work with. But, again, I caution people, you don't want to look too far in the past other than just evaluate, okay, well, that scenario wasn't the best case scenario. So what did I do with it? I became a better father because of it. My dad wasn't as present as he needed to be. I raised my daughter on my own. I couldn't be more present. And maybe I wasn't always emotionally present all at the same time, but doing it all on your own, I think that, you do the best you can. Back to doing the best you can, but,
yeah, thank you for sharing that. And to speak to your personal evolution, like, you noticed and you mentioned that, like, there were things that, this is inherently who you are. Like, this is you, like, as a person. This is Sebastian. At the same time, it's something where you had no idea at such a young age. And so, about what point, or like, what did that look like when you started to notice? Because you mentioned stubbornness was something that helped you to keep pushing on and keep being yourself. But, like, was there a certain point, or was there a certain time period that was kind of like, hold up, let me choose to do this evolution thing. Let me, like, start to make some changes.
I remember being resistant to anything my parents had to say. I always had a great relationship to my mom, but she's a gigantic enabler. So it was easy to have a great relationship with her because that's what she does. My dad, not so much. He's stubborn. He's set in his ways, and that's just the way it is. And he's always going to have an opinion, and he's never going to, can you repeat the question? I totally got lost when I was answering there.
Where Was there a certain time or a certain event
Got it.
that
Yeah.
inspired you to say, like, hold up, like, let me change some things here. Let me do
Yeah.
something different.
Yeah. So when I was 18, I felt the resistance of,
Okay.
when I was 18 too, of like, fuck you. I'm out of the house. You're not telling me anything.
Right.
So that whole idea, and I just kind of had my own thought process, a bit rebellious, but at the same time, it was a lot of pent up aggression too. So it wasn't just
Mhm.
no, it
Right.
was no and fuck you. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
Right.
which there was a lot of anger behind all of that. I had a kid young. I was 20 years old.
Okay.
I don't recommend doing that. But it worked, and I became an entrepreneur a couple of years later, and she's 21 now, and whole different level of parenting. But anyway, that's a whole nother different episode. But I think it was, I want to say, well, it's really the beginning of the Social Buzz TV story, of I moved back to Southern California in 2000 and from Southern California in 2008 with a duffel bag and my kid. Moved back to Miami, friends in low places, found a place to stay, and did nothing for 2 years. It was just a complete, 2008, 2010. I think a lot of people were in what's really going on here. But I had this awakening moment in 2000, I guess 2010. And I said, enough. This is it. Like, all you do is drink bum beer every day and watch daytime television. Like, that's all that I did. Milwaukee's best, the
I
Beast,
was
baby.
just gonna say, I was like, what is bum beer? But
Bum beer. Milwaukee, the Beast, baby.
yeah.
Natty Light. Hey, whatever's on sale for $4,
God.
So I had an awakening moment, and I thought, and I was living in my buddy's place that he was in foreclosure on because Miami's market had crashed after I
Right.
moved back. And I was like, I need to get a place of my own. It doesn't feel good to not pay rent.
Right.
So people are like, what are you I'm like, no, it doesn't. Like, it's like, that's what you do. Like, you pay for room and board. Like, that's just what happens. So I found an apartment, and I took a gig in Las Vegas that summer, and not like on the strip juggling or anything. Like, it was in Henderson, and I went to work for a network marketing company on the corporate side. And my job was to create training curriculum and also facilitate it at their large events. That was my first opportunity to get on stage.
Mm.
And when I did that, I was like, this is it. This is what I was born to do. I was born to be on stage. It was July 2009, something like that.
That's cool.
And when I came back, I'd been active on social media, but I didn't do anything business wise. I was doing direct marketing for real estate professionals before the market crashed. So I had to reinvent myself. But I said, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to, build something long term and sustainable where people not only invest in me, but my business too. So in 2000, it was right around 2009, 2010. I don't really remember the exact date. I called my friend Whitney, who I woke up and I had this awakening moment. I was like, out of my way, I need to go see Tony Robbins. I'm going to go awaken the giant within. So I called my friend Whitney, who's working for Tony at the time. I know a bunch of Tony people. I'm friends with his son and a bunch of people, but I had not been to an actual Tony event. So I thought maybe that's exactly what I need. Let's go walk on fire.
Right.
So I call her and she gives me all the details. And I'm like, all right, cool. It's like $600. It's in Long Beach, California. And the next couple of months, I'll have to figure it out. So she calls me back a half hour later and she says, oh my God, I forgot to tell you that my best friend lives on Miami Beach and she's actually part of Tony's core team of 6. She travels the world with him. And I thought, no shit. She goes, I definitely think it's worth the cocktail. I'll introduce you guys and you can link up. Well, at this time, I'm still trying to figure out my consulting business. Right. And I'd shot a video on my laptop and I showed that video to her after we got introduced to each other, like right away. And she had a very excitable, high energy, total hustler. We were speaking a similar language and I'm like, this is perfect timing. A human like this is exactly what I need right now. So I showed her the video and she's like, oh my God, that's amazing. Let's talk more about it on Friday. So that Friday we were supposed to meet at Smith and Walensky's, and to the advice of a good friend of mine, they were like, how much money do you have? And like, I had like $80. And they're like, there's no way you're going to be able to take her to happy hour at Smith and Walensky's.
Don't go Smith
for $80. Yeah.
You'll get like a drink.
Yeah, exactly.
You get a couple, but yeah.
So I moved the meeting to Fridays.
Okay.
Right there on 5th and Washington.
Right.
And we were instant. We had an instant connection. We're great. We hit it off. We're just a great conversation, great human. And I'll never forget it. We were sitting out on Ocean Drive with all the rest of the tourists, embracing happy hour. I think it was BOGO. That's why I really pulled it off there. Still worried about is the check going to be more than $80? But anyway,
Right.
she looks at me, and this is where it all changed. She looked at me and she said, Sebastian, so what's next? And I said, I don't know. And she looked at me and she said, that is a fucking problem. And I thought, oh, these are my offended days.
Right.
The triggers were real.
Right.
But I'm like, this chick works for Tony Robbins, like top producer. Shut the fuck up and just go with this conversation. So I said, well, what do you mean? She goes, I'll tell you exactly what I mean. Who's missing out? Because you're not showing up. And I thought, light bulb moment.
Right.
She's like, you're doing all this stuff with social media, all this buzz with you sent me that video. You could start a TV show. You'd have 1 million followers. Like, what are you doing? What do you mean you don't know? And I thought, holy cow. I'm like, yeah, social media, social buzz, a TV show. How about social buzz TV? She goes, sounds good to me. So I sent those 3 words to a designer on Monday, would come back to me with what would become the social buzz TV logo.
I remember the logo. It was a little TV.
Yep. So I continued to evangelize for the next 6 months that I'm building the biggest, greatest social media. So I met you right around this time. Social media company out there. We're going to educate people. And I don't know how we make money. So I spent like a year evangelizing. So social buzz TV. I have no idea how we're going to make money. And then we started to make money because I met Nailene and we started doing events and stuff together. And we did boot camps and stuff like that. In fact, I met her at Smith & Walensky's during one of her social media boot camps.
That's
so
and so that's where I came into play. I worked with because I knew Nailene.
Correct. Exactly. So it all started to culminate. But after the conversation with my friend there on that Friday night at Happy Hour, when she was like, who's missing out? And I was like, holy cow, I am. So 6 months later, I did the first ever social media day. It's now a thing now, June 30th, every day worldwide, if people care about it. But this was the very first one. And I got a call to partner with somebody to go do it. And I was like, yes, I ran out, got a bunch of shirts and I got a banner and all kinds of, swag. And I don't know how I pulled that off, but I did. And I went and set everything up. It was at the Pelican Hotel on 8th and Ocean Drive. And I went in there and set up my banner, whole nine. I go out for a break or something. I come back in before the event started, and there's one person sitting at the bar. Guess who it is? The Tony Robbins girl.
Yeah. I was like, it was homegirl. And
she turns around and she goes, wait a second. Is it? I go, yeah, you are one powerful motherfucker. It's good to see you again. Yeah, this is a product of our conversation.
What was her name?
Is.
What is her name?
Her name's Dawn.
Dawn. Okay.
And
shout out to Dawn.
Yeah, absolutely. And well, because I hadn't seen her after I'd seen her that Friday night. We went and we had a great time and had a great conversation, and I was extremely encouraged, but she's a busy girl. So I had not seen her. So when I ran to her like 6 months later, she was like, what? And I was like, what? And then I hadn't seen her for quite some time. And I finally ended up going to UPW years later. And I'm about to walk on fire, and Tony's about to walk with me. He walks with like 3 or 4 people, and then he's out during the fire walk. There's like 9 lanes of fire and 5,000 people. It's just an incredible experience. And I look over to my right, and who's on the fire lane next to me? Dawn. Yeah. So all of everything. I've been to UPW twice since.
UPW and Lisa Power Within.
Correct. I recommend everybody does it at least one time. You can go several times. You're going to get something different from it every time. Tony is the best of the best of the best. He was a coach before everyone became a coach, but it's a transformational experience. Lots of rah-rah, lots of emotions come up. It's a beautiful experience actually. But that was where it all started changing.
Videos, just sidebar.
What's that?
Sidebar, main bar. I like to do his priming videos. Like he doesn't meditate, he does priming.
Yeah, he does.
So it's like breath work and some visualization. So you can YouTube those.
Guy's a superhuman.
If you're
total superhuman. Yeah. So that was how that was the biggest shift in time of like when the game changer.
Right.
But we're never done. So the story's never done. And you're never, just when you think that you're there where you need to be. So 2016 rolls around and I decide I want a girlfriend. So I get on Tinder. This is when Tinder was cool. And I meet a girl in Fort Lauderdale, and I go meet her for a beer, March 1st, 2016. I'll never forget it. And she said, hey, I'm in this personal development course right now. And I was like, oh, Let me tell you about my personal development experience. So at this point, I'm a personal development. I've been to Landmark Forum. I've been to Tony Robbins. I mean, I am a personal development virtuoso. Let me tell
Right,
you about personal development.
right.
So she was like, so I think maybe you should join this training. I think that it will greatly impact you. And I'm like, well, I'm in an implementation stage right now. So I'm
Mhm.
implementing everything that I've done. And she wouldn't back down on this. And we went out on that date and we never stopped dating. And she eventually got me enrolled in that class. And then she broke up with me in the middle of it.
Mm.
So I'm already dealing with my demons, and then I have to deal with heartache at the same time. So it was a
Always fun.
messy process, but I was there for all of it. I was committed to whatever the fuck is on the other side of this is far better than where I'm at right now. And I came out of that loving myself. I came out of that with full, absolute 100% accountability for my life and ownership for my life, realizing that every fucking thing that happens to me is my fucking fault. And
Yeah.
there's so much freedom there. And there's so much freedom available with loving ourselves too. I didn't realize that. But the most attractive part was that when we love ourselves, we attract other people to love themselves. And holy shit, what can happen then? So I've been on that path since 2016, really committed to it, really, really diving in and digging in and creating a level of an awareness where I know that my own bullshit doesn't work on
Right,
myself.
right.
And then that's turned into the work that I do today with podcasting. I mean, I communicate for a living and I help other people find their voice in communicating too. So it's a wild ride, but I still feel like it's day one.
I love so much of that. So thank you for sharing all of that. And first of all, so what was the most recent, or not most recent, but what was the course that y'all enrolled in, that she enrolled you in?
It was gratitude training. It's no longer, unfortunately. They had one hell of a movement, but they had some gigantic growing pains,
Mm,
and it faded. But
mm.
my daughter went through it. My breathwork practitioner went through it. A bunch of my friends went through it. Years later, they went through it. So when I'm making a phone call trying to recruit people, because personal development is enrollment, life is enrollment, right? So I'm trying to enroll people. They're like, yeah, I'll check it out. And then years later, they go through. They're like, oh my god, that was amazing. So my daughter called it a beautiful experience. I was like, I don't know if I go that far, but I guess in retrospect it was.
Well, and so also, if I may, your daughter has already gotten a lot of this kind of stuff from what it seems from like you. Like there's probably a lot of priming in that sense.
Oh
Whereas
yeah.
most of us were kind of just, thrown into the whole like healing situation because yeah, one of
I
the things, go ahead.
yeah, no, I it was important for me to mentor her up
Yeah,
in her
yeah,
especially her teens, because I know what the fuck I was doing. So I was like,
right,
let me at least get her around a bunch of women
right.
that are they're trying to figure their lives out and they're grown women. So what impact could that have by her being in the room? And
Mm,
she went through a 2-year program with 30 women and with my dear friend Mina Shaw. And she's still in communication with her to this day as a mentor and stuff. But that I think that early on that early on exposure to accountability and
yeah,
ownership and healing and developing and becoming very very important.
yeah. I agree. So yeah, I think that probably, I mean, I can see how that would be, her saying a beautiful experience for the rest of us are like, what the fuck is happening? Like,
Right, right.
and like she already had some of the prep work there. And so yeah, I love that. I also, I mean, you said so much good stuff. But first of all, it was cool that you were able to identify like the moment, right? You were like, it was around like this time, like these things started to happen. And throughout your story, you continue to make the choice to evolve. Like you said, like whenever you were in the gratitude training, it was something where this, use this as an example because it's a quick one, that you were like, okay, so like dealing with this and heartache, and I'm like here for it. Like that was a conscious decision. That was a choice that you made because, I mean, let's be honest, like a lot of people, I think, I mean, not to like, you know, get on to anyone, but I think that a lot of people don't have the tools to know how to navigate that type of experience. And I think that that's worth mentioning too, because you had already been doing, like you said, like a lot of the self-help personal development work. And I think that that, like for your daughter, like set you up for not to make this, easier necessarily, but to make it bearable because
Sure,
this stuff is not easy stuff.
sure.
And I think that oftentimes, and this is what I talk to a lot of people about, they see this, technique or this practice or this thing that works, right? And they're like, let me do that. But then they crash and burn because they haven't set the foundation up. They haven't done any like preliminary stuff that would enable them to just jump into the fire, so to speak.
Correct. Right.
Um,
Well, it's
it's like,
unfamiliar.
do what?
It's unfamiliar.
Yeah, exactly. It's very unfamiliar. It's
It's
something,
and it's an inside job. There's no, you're not going to go tell somebody to heal.
right? Right. Because here's the thing, even if you were able to acknowledge that, it's something where that person's going to be like, well, fuck you. Like, you don't know me. Won't do what
Right.
you told me, kind of a thing.
Sure.
And so when you mentioned about your childhood and how we're coming into like adulthood, excuse me, I don't mean to say like childhood, but whenever you mentioned that you turned 18 and you started to get pissed, I was like, hashtag same. Like, if anyone knows my story, I was a very angry child because I got so tired of feeling pain and hurt that I would just get angry because that emotion would make others not want to spend time with me. And so it was like self-protecting in that way. Because yeah, like I didn't know that I needed to like look at this shit and like, heal this shit and process it. I just knew that like it was uncomfortable. I didn't like it. What do I do? Boom, I get angry. That way people leave me alone. I don't have to think about it. And
Sure.
so I went on with that for a long time until yeah, I started to choose my own like evolutionary path, which was probably right around the time, and that's why you're such a special guest. It was probably right around the time that I was interning and working with you and Naylene because
Yeah.
I started reading more Malcolm Gladwell, actually, where he talks about like outliers and like social, behavioral science, like that kind of thing. And I'm like, this is really interesting. And then I started getting into like more of that kind of information about like how like our brains work and how like we work, and interact with humans. And so it was something where that kind of like set me up to start to get curious about things because I think
Sure.
that power of curiosity, like, well, what else is possible, right? Like, you first of all, and I love that you said this too, you have to be tired of your own bullshit, right? I work with people like, if they're not tired of their own bullshit, then like you're not ready. Like, you have to be tired of your own bullshit. And like you said, you have to have accountability for the fact that like, all right, like I recognize that, yeah, like this is me. Some things that I'm doing like have not been the best. Like, I'm tired of it. Like, what can I do? And like that's the point that I think that people are ready to start. What do you think about that?
Um, a clarifying question. Sorry about that.
So you had said that people, you can't tell anyone like, hey, like you need to heal,
Right.
right?
Right. Exactly.
And so what I was saying is because like you had said, it was something where you started to be accountable, like, this is my shit. Like the decisions I have made have like brought me here. And I think that before most people will arrive at that place where they are like, okay, what else can I do? What else is possible? That power of curiosity, they must first they must first arrive at the destination of like tired of my own bullshit. And so I was wondering if you feel that that is something that is true for people or if it's something that looks different for like everyone, which true. But I feel like generally speaking, we first arrive at the like, all right, this is my shit. I'm tired of it. And then like, what else is there? And that's when we start to look for the different pathways.
Yeah. I don't think there's any other way. You don't arrive until you're sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Yes.
When you've been in your own way long enough and there's no other option. Speaking of Tony, I think one of his most famous quotes is when it's something about when the pain of staying the same is greater than the pain of change,
Right.
We shift.
Right. Yeah, that's true.
Okay.
That's definitely true. So, and I love that you mentioned as well so much stuff, but the fact that like you're never done, right? Like it's never like, okay, well, I did the stuff now, I'm just gonna sit back, relax a bit. Like it's never, like you said, and I think that this is important to acknowledge and repeat that you feel like today is day one, because I think what oftentimes happens is that so many people start to do this and they're like, fuck, like like I'm tired and I don't want to do this anymore. And I mean, we're all tired.
Right.
This is just like, and this is why I talk about like systems and structures. Like you have to arrive at a place where you put the systems and structures in place. So it's no longer something that you have to like think about. It's just sort of who you are at that point. You're like,
Sure.
I am the kind of person that does this stuff. Does it suck? Yes. Is it uncomfortable? Absolutely. And so it's something where um, even though you are uncomfortable, you again have set up the systems and structures where you're like, but this is what I do now. And so
Yeah.
that's like what I work to like help people to establish for themselves, because the systems and structures that work for you won't work for me and vice
Yeah.
versa. What works for me will not work for you. And I think that that's part of the evolution, right? Is
Sure.
continuously taking time to figure out, well, what does work for me in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Again, you have to arrive there. There's no one's, I mean, you can hire a coach, you can work with people, you can, have them ask the right questions that reveal some blind spots, if you will. But, above and beyond that, it's a one player game.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that, so kind of like what you just said reminded me of like Game Genie. It's like I'm the player, but like there are certain codes and people that can like help support with that, like Tony Robbins, like Dawn, like the people that came into your life. Like you're the one doing the stuff, but like coaches, like therapists, like counselors, like different people will help you. Like they'll be your Game Genie in that way. Do you remember Game Genie? Yes, right?
It vaguely.
What? So
Oh
okay,
yeah, yeah, yeah. It had all the games.
it had all the hacks. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it had all the knowledge.
Yeah.
Like you would like plug it into your Nintendo. We're going way back, like just regular
Yeah.
NES, and you would say like, "I want this code," and you'd plug it in, and it'd give you that. So you still have to play the game. You still might fuck it up, but
Right.
it's going to support you. So that's kind of how I see people like Tony Robbins and like Dawn and like these people that are kind of there to serve as like supporting elements to your own evolution and growth.
Sure. Absolutely.
So, what a cool little analogy we just came up with there. So, okay. Um, we've spoken about the benefits, right? Like we know it's a good thing to evolve to actually fulfill like a purpose and like you said to like help others, like who's missing out on you not being you, right? Like you learning more about yourself and choosing to evolve has supported you not only with your own endeavors but also others, right? And finding their voice, your daughter, and other people that I know you have impacted that we haven't even touched on. And so let's touch on the cost really quick. So, like, what's the cost and the harm in not evolving? Because we were speaking about how it's a choice, we're never done. And so, like, what happens when we see that choice, when we're at that crossroads, we're tired of our own bullshit, and we're like, well, what else is possible? And we're like, I don't really want to do that. What happens? Like, what are the costs with that?
Well, I just think that you're delaying the process, and I think we're all guilty of it more times than not. But do you? I mean, you just have to ask yourself an honest question. I mean, do you want to shift, or do you want to stay exactly where you're at? Because you can't do both. So
Right.
you've got to pick one. There's no both. There's do or do not in that scenario. So again, arriving at a place, I don't think that anybody's gonna. I think life will show up.
Mm-hmm.
Life will show up with brute force
Mm-hmm.
and shift and force us to shift at times. But does it have to come to that?
Oh,
That's the whole idea. Do we really need to wait for that to happen?
that's
I mean, do we have to wait for the entire ship to sink when we realize there was a tiny hole in it?
That's such okay. I love that question so much. I have done a couple of conversations where um accepting your reality. We did a whole ass episode on that. And also I did a solo episode where I spoke about like it's not that life gets better, it's that you learn how to navigate it more
You get
effectively.
better.
Yeah,
Yeah, you
exactly.
get better. Right.
You get better.
Exactly.
I'll link both of those in the description. But um yeah, it doesn't have to always be a breakdown, I think is a great way to articulate what you were saying. It can be a breakthrough before we get to that point. Like the ship doesn't have to like you said, like sink before us, before we acknowledge, oh shit, like we need to patch this hole kind of a
Sure.
thing. And so
Yeah.
I think that when we look at it in that way, like to answer like yeah what you'd said, like the cost in not evolving is just like complacency, like being stagnant, and yeah, like prolonging the inevitable in the sense that like life is gonna, like you said, to use your words, come at you with brute force, and it's gonna go on. And so it's a matter of, are you going to continue to get knocked in the face, or are you going to learn how to fight back? Are you going to learn some moves, right? Like, are you going to learn how to block some punches, kind of a thing,
Yeah.
with your evolution and choose in that regard? And so, um, whenever we are thinking of it in that consideration, what do you think helps someone to start to realize, like for anyone listening who's like, you know what, they had said at the beginning to think about, where are some places that I could evolve? Where might I be able to make that choice right here and now in my own life? What would you say are some tips for someone who doesn't know where to start, but that wants to evolve before the ship starts to sink, when they recognize, like, or maybe even if they don't know that there's a hole, but like, what would you say are some insights, or what's some advice that you would give someone who wants to evolve and be more proactive with it, but they don't necessarily know like what to do?
Register for a Tony Robbins event. First and foremost, you got to find, there's got to be a starting point somewhere. Right. You're not going to wake up one day and go, you know what, I need to heal. Life's going to show up. Opportunities are going to present themselves. Relationships are going to be destroyed. Something's going to happen where you're at desperate measures and desperate for change. And usually the people that you need within that time reveal themselves, whether it's a course, a book, podcast, whatever it might be. I think that, so if you have that desire there, it's worth being with for a minute. It's worth giving a second thought to. If you I continue to come back, man, there's got to be more. Man, I know I can become a better person. That kept showing up for me.
Right.
And it didn't go anywhere, but I was resistant. The more resistant I became, the more present it was. What we resist persists. That's real. What you are avoiding is chasing you.
Yeah.
And that's in every area of your life. So if you've got that gentle nudge, you need to act on it in some form or fashion, even if it's just a further thought, journaling it down. Write down who you are right now and who you'd like to be. If you checked all the boxes with who you are right now and you're good, then don't do anything.
Yeah.
But that's very, very rare. That's going to be the case if at all.
I don't know anyone, but yeah, like that's a good point. And you mentioned something. So the teachers, the book, the course, like whatever will reveal itself when you are ready. So I pose the question, is it that they reveal themselves when they're ready? Or is it that you start to become aware of the fact that like, oh shit, like some things need to change, and they were actually there all along? It just took you noticing. It's kind of like
I don't know. I come from the school of thought that when the student's ready, the teacher will appear.
So I'm from the school of thought that like we have opportunities where we can choose them at any moment, but oftentimes it's something where we're so focused on other things that we don't recognize those opportunities are there. We don't recognize those teachers and those tools are there for us. And so kind of like the Wizard of Oz, like it was in you all along, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Is the mentality that I take. It's just a matter of, like you said, like some shit usually happens because no one ever told you this shit, right? No one ever told you, hey, before the ship is sinking, take a look around, do the inspection, right? No one ever told us this shit. So we are here now to say, don't let the ship sink.
Right.
Take some time right here and now to start to evaluate. I think that that's great advice. Like, write down like who it is that you want to be and who it is that you want to be. I think that the first step is always awareness. And so if
self-awareness.
Yeah. So one of the things that I have people that I work with do is to write down like the top domains in your life, whether that be, it's usually career, your platonic relationships, like your friendships, your romantic relationships, your personal interests, like those kinds of things. Some people also have like spirituality or religion. And so like write down like, the domains of your life. And I'm not talking like fucking like 50. I mean like 8. Like you shouldn't have more than like 8. Like you can bucket them under there. And from there, give them a metric, like a 1 to 10 rating. Like how satisfied are you right here now with that thing? Because that's going to give you an indication of, like you said, like you got to start somewhere. Sure. And so what needs the most attention right now? Because if you write down everything, and if you are like, okay, my relationships are at like a 4 right now, like scale 1 to 10, 1 being absolute shit, 10 being can't be better, but my job is at like a 7, then okay, room for improvement in both. But I can clearly see, oh, I should probably focus on like my family first, because that's a little bit further on the spectrum from that 10. And so, yeah, I think that that's like a great way to look at it. And so for anyone who is, like we said, listening to this and wanting to look for areas where you can choose to evolve, then those are some places to start. Write down who you are, who you want to be. And also you can take my, example of like the domains and give that a metric. I'm a huge 1 to 10 scale kind of a fan. So yeah, I hope that we provided you some valuable insight today. Sebastian, thank you for being here.
Thank
Where
you,
can they
Jonna.
find you and what do you have going on?
I hang out a lot on LinkedIn, so just look for me under Sebastian Rusk, and also on Instagram. Instagram is podcast launch guy, podcast launch guy. And if you've been thinking about starting a podcast or trying to figure out a way to find your voice, get your social media content in check, a podcast is a great way to be able to do that. So, and I'll talk to anybody for a few minutes about what's possible with that. John will include this link in the description of this episode, but if you want to write it down right now, it's podcastlaunchlabnow.com, podcastlaunchlabnow.com. Just type in your email address. That'll bring you right to my calendar, and you can schedule a time to chat about what's possible with the world of podcasting. But I will tell you this, podcasting will change your life and your business if you let it. Thanks again, John. I appreciate you.
Yeah, you're so welcome. Thank you for being here. And like Sebastian, like you said, everything will be linked in the description. We will be posting polls to ask about your experience with evolution on Wednesday. And then we'll be going live to answer any questions that you have about podcasting, about evolution on Friday. So do make sure to join us for that. If you need anything or want to talk more about your evolution, my contact details will also be in the description. And evolution is a key part of learning more about who you are, like we've spoken. And something that I work with is helping people to make the self-help work for them. And so if anyone is curious about that, then you can visit whenselfhelpisn'thelping.com and learn more there. Otherwise, have an amazing week. Share this with someone that would benefit from hearing it, and we will see you on Friday. Bye.